Hello and welcome to 8:30 Prep in Quarantine. I'm Phil McCaffrey, and joining me is my beloved colleague Will, who is going to talk about reading. So last night we did ACT reading exclusively, and Will, I got to tell you, I have used your terminology that is broad and narrow. I want to throw that on as a
Yeah.
comment. So broad and narrow. I'm gonna really tear it up on Thursday because I was tutoring Joe from Central Catholic, and we did all reading today. So as we were doing the reading today, we went through some specific things on the ACT, and it was great because all of his questions, I was like, narrow question, look for this word, find the word, match the key words. So it was really good. I'm really excited about broad and narrow on Thursday. So I'm gonna rewrite my presentation. So I've got a nice board to present. Tomorrow is Wednesday night. It's a special night. We have Emily Fear, who's the teen librarian who works with us very closely at Swickley Public Library. So, Will, introduce yourself again tonight. Will is a graduate student of
Education.
education, and and
Uh,
and specifically what? Let's
uh, Specifically, I'm a graduate student in education and actually pre-K through fourth grade education over at Duquesne University.
So once again, I'll use the same joke 2 nights in a row for our 8 viewers. Is that's perfectly fit to teach teenagers how to read and find answers on wait. It's in the way.
No, you need it for the close to the microphone.
I need it. Teo's moving my laptop closer to the microphone so that we could hear you better. Okay, that's right. I'll just use my cell phone to chat here. So, Will, take it away. What are we doing tonight?
Awesome. So, if you tuned in last night, bear with us. There will be some retreading of the same ground here. So, the good thing about if you're taking both the SAT and the ACT,
Which you should.
the which you should, the um, reading methods that we use are very similar on both, with some key exceptions. Those key exceptions being the SAT reading section includes a data table each time on the reading section, which doesn't happen on the ACT. That
Oh,
only
I'm.
happens in
Oh,
the
I'm.
science section.
Do you have a data table to show? Because
I
I'm.
don't. I don't on this one. I
Oh,
actually
okay.
I chose a. We're doing a passage. We're going to go over somewhat briefly a passage from SAT practice test number one. I think one of the harder ones, which is the one talking about mining on the moon and on Mars and things like that. That one I think is a little bit tougher. But no, I didn't include one of the data table reading. Why did you? What were you thinking?
Oh, because I like to tear the SAT apart because the SAT changed when they announced their change. One of the things that they really wanted to do was include a science section. So they really, really want to be
Right.
the ACT. And so they just include the science questions. They literally imitate the science questions, and they put them all throughout all 4 sections of math, reading, and writing. And it's just totally ridiculous that they put them in writing. We should do an SAT writing week too, because there is some differences. We just did some basic grammar with David last week with David Exotic and the Grammar King. So so now we've got Reading Rainbow with Will Burton, who is standing in for LeVar Burton. So you've got some passages for us. So let's jump right into it. Why don't you
Yeah,
click
yeah.
on your presentation?
Let's jump right into it.
And
Give me one
I
second.
didn't monkey with your presentation tonight, so
Oh, all right.
I left this one alone.
That's fair. So yeah, so again, if you were with us last night, bear with us. There'll be some retreading in the same ground. Like I said, the reading methods work on both tests. There's just some slight differences in the questions. But let's get right into it. So
My chat
the
is visible.
to its credit, on the SAT, you get significantly more time than you do on the ACT for
My
the
chat from
reading
my phone.
section. you get,
From your computer
you good?
on there.
I'll keep going, Will.
Okay. You get 65 minutes for 52 questions, which is about 75 seconds per question, plus the reading that you ostensibly think that you need to do, right?
Did you just throw that in because I did 52 seconds yesterday?
Maybe, maybe, because you knew it right off the bat. So I wanted to clear it up. So you get 65 minutes. You get just over an hour for 52 questions, plus the reading. So that doesn't leave a lot of time for reading the passage. And like we talked about last night, it's almost as if they don't want you to read the passages. It's almost as if these tests are designed so that you don't need to read the passages. And that's 100% true.
Well, one of the things we talk about is this is a college test, and so you having been to how many colleges now? 4, 3? How many?
3.
Okay, I've been to 5. So between the two of us, we've been to 8 colleges. In college, do you have enough time to do all of your reading?
Depends.
It
Depends on the subject matter, right?
It depends on the subject matter. So one of the things I think that they're doing, I think that they're purposely trying to get you to skim, because there is a lot of skim reading in college. There's just a lot. There's just a lot you have to skim. So you have to get through a lot of material. A lot of textbooks are very, very dry. A lot of articles are very dry. And of course, now there's a whole change in reading from when I was a college student, because now you read a lot of things on the internet, and there's too much information. So you do have to scan really quickly.
Mm-hmm. That is very true. And I spent some time studying philosophy, and you might get 100 pages from each class to do, and you're working a job and you've got a lot of things going on, you have a full life, so it can be very difficult. So skimming skills are extremely helpful, extremely helpful, and that's basically what we're going to be talking about here, sort of in depth, is skimming skills, learning how to, especially on this test, if you have 75 seconds per question and you don't know exactly what's coming up in these passages, you have to work really quickly and really hard to figure out what those answer choices are. But the point of skimming, and that's what we are talking about here, we're talking about skimming the passages quickly to get baseline information that you need, and then moving on to the questions and allowing the questions to prompt you to find the right answers. So when we talk about, when you go to open up your practice test or you go to the SAT, you're getting 60 to 90 seconds or less per passage that you're going to be skimming. And the methodology behind skimming is simply that your brain is a high functioning supercomputer. Your brain is taking in millions of pieces of data at every single second that it is organizing and sifting through and putting into a hierarchy of importance at every single second. And it does it really, really well. You can do a million things in your day and notice a million things and feel and think and all of these things. Hey, Teo. And you will never even remember it because you're just doing it unconsciously. And your brain is really good at operating at that really, really high level without you even realizing it. And so when we talk about skimming, what we're really talking about is something that's called priming. You're priming your brain for the questions that are to come by skimming through the passage, by finding key things in the passage that allows your brain to orient itself whenever you start getting to the questions. Okay? So you're going to spend 60 to 90 seconds or less per passage that you get to.
I really like the word priming, and we've got a comment chimed in from my wife that's a really good explanation. You're priming the pump. You're finding out where these things are, and if you look at things like proper nouns, dates, locations, I particularly like strange, long, irregular words and phrases. These are things to mark as you're going along, and the thing that I like to say, it's a very sexist statement, but but is to not read like a girl. Don't get emotionally connected and try to understand and comprehend. I know I just put that on YouTube and it'll be forever out there. And I usually don't say those type of things except for in my own office. But read like a boy. Just get for the facts. Just don't care. One of the things that when I talk with a lot of students is that a girl will take too long, and some boys. This is a Venn diagram. I say it's about 80% girls, 20% boys. So it's really a student with test anxiety, and they care too much. They want to know what's going on as opposed to what's the damn answer, right? That's what I really like about this irregular words. And I'll show you this on Thursday with one that we did with Joe. There was a an acronym, BMT, and the question was BMT did something, and I'll show you right there where it just matched. I was able to read backwards, like you said. We'll go through, read backwards, find the irregular word, match it to the question, answer the question, and move on without being connected. And that'll be on Thursday's presentation.
Good. Yeah. And you're going to hear this all the time, and it's because it's true. You don't get points for comprehending the passage. You don't get anything for comprehending the passage. The only thing you get points for is the correct bubble on your bubble sheet when you get through. And you certainly don't want to run out of time before you've had the opportunity to answer each and every question correctly or been able to assess them. So you want to spend just a little bit of time searching for these key things in that 60 to 90 seconds of skimming. And those key things are the first sentence of each paragraph. I recommend reading the first sentence of each paragraph, marking, or just even, frankly, your brain works really well. Your brain does its job very well. As long as you are seeing these things, your brain is storing them, at least for the short amount of time that you're going to be taking the test. So, but it also helps if you are, when you're taking the test, I see a proper noun, aka capitalized words, right? This isn't German, so not all of our nouns are capital. So we have proper nouns that are going to be capitalized, circle them. You see a date, circle it. A number, 8 million light years, circle it. It might come up. 80% of such and such, it might come up. Go ahead and circle it. If you see locations, and then, yes, also sort of my favorite, strange, long, or irregular words and phrases, because those strange, long, and irregular words and phrases are also going to be in the questions. And the questions are going to ask for specific information that's in the passage. And this priming process that you go through is really just giving your brain markers to refer back to. Because whenever you start to see questions, your brain's going to immediately think in a very visual way, where did I see that information in the passage? And that just allows you to go back and find it quickly. And you can do that either by circling with your pen and whatnot, but your brain will also be able to remember where those things are. And so that's why we skim, the power of your brain. Your brain is far better at taking in information than we are even consciously aware of. Allow it to do what it does so well. The other main reason is question formatting. And the questions on the test,
I have to pause right here and give a huge shout out to our boy Sam Tyson. Sam, thanks for tuning in. Sam's an old neighbor of ours from Swickley that we've got some really good stories that we tell quite often about Sam.
And Max.
and Max. Is Max on? All right, watching from Texas. Sam and Max are watching my YouTube show. Yeah, so.
right.
Sam and Max were at our house one night when the police showed up. So, but we'll just leave it at that.
Oh, good. So question formatting. Allow the questions to show you where the answers are going to be.
That's a great statement. That is a great statement. Allow the question to show you. Yeah.
Yes, it's extremely important. And you should have already maybe been a step ahead of me if I'm saying, well, if I'm not reading the passage, what am I reading? You're reading the questions. The questions are where you're going to find your answers. It may seem counterintuitive, but that's the truth. And there are going to be two specific types. So let's talk about the questions. There are generally two separate types or genuses of questions, right? You have narrow scope questions, which are going to refer to specific line numbers in the passage, um, or specific vocabulary that the passage is using. They might use a specific type of terminology that you would only read in a passage like the one you have in front of you, or they'll have vocabulary or vocabulary in context, something in quotation marks. Okay, and those will indicate to you, well, that's exactly what I need to be looking for whenever I'm answering this question, right? These specific line numbers, this specific phrase, or this type of vocabulary, etc. And then there's broad scope questions, which these are the ones that are always a pain in the butt. What is the theme? What is the point of this paragraph? What is the purpose of this argument? Something along those lines that don't have a specific line number that you can reference really quickly. There's always well, maybe not always, but there's 95% of the time a verbatim support in the passage that will indicate what the right answer is. But sometimes you may have to dig a little bit to find it. So we call those broad scope questions. So you do the narrow scope questions first, because the narrow scope questions tell you exactly where to find the answer, and it's written in the question. In line numbers 32 to 37, it says this: what point does it serve? You go back to those line numbers and you find the answer. And what does this mean? It means that you don't do the questions in order, which we talked about last night.
Right.
Yes, you do not do the questions in order. Almost invariably, the first question after you're done skimming the passage is going to be, what's the main point of this passage? Skip it. Circle it a few times so you don't forget, and then skip it and move on. Head straight to the narrow scope questions, and I'm going to show you why in a second. But for the simple fact that is where the information that you need is going to be. And that information that you get from the narrow scope questions is going to allow you to better answer the broad scope questions whenever you get to that penny.
That's absolutely true. The narrow scope gives you the broad scope.
Exactly.
And so practice finding the narrow scope questions.
Yes.
The key to this is practicing. And as this moves online, it's going to be completely different than it is now, because this is a whole printed page that you're showing right here. They won't be able to give that whole printed page on the computer. So
you mean they won't be able to see this?
No, for like the GRE and the GMAT, what they do now is they give shorter paragraphs, and then they go through it. And then the questions are next to it, but that's a whole nother topic as we get into computerized testing, which may come because of the coronavirus, COVID, may come sooner than we think.
Yes. Okay, interesting. All right, so in this case, I took one of the passages, and actually I took one that has two passages because these tend to be a little bit harder. Because there's normally a comparison. You have to go back and forth to make sure your support lines up, et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to point something out with regard to the narrow scope question. So let's say you get this passage, you go through, you scan for information. So if I was here, I'd be scanning. I'd say, first of its kind, long hyphenated word, Sydney, Australia, space engineering research. I would just be scanning through for big words, proper nouns, dates of 2020, 2012, okay, Colorado, harvesting metals from asteroids. That's interesting. And I would be going through, right? I would be looking at that information, and I would just be making quick mental notes, and I'd be reading with my pencil, just, okay, interesting, making little circles, going through, and then I'd go to the questions. Let me show you what the narrow scope questions are referring to in the passage. So here's a perfect example. I have circled on this page all of the line numbers referenced directly in the narrow scope questions. So question 42, 44, 45, 46, 48, and 51 all specifically referenced line numbers in the passage. So they specifically reference in a very narrow way where the answer is going to be to the question. And so the reason that we skim and we don't read the whole passage anyway is because we don't want to have to do double the footwork, right? We skim the passage for basic information. We go to the questions. Oh, look, now we have to go back to the passage anyway. We have to read. We have to read it in context. So if you get a question with a line number that says, so in lines 5 to 9, well, you should be reading lines 4 to 10, definitely, to make sure that you're getting your information in context anyway. So,
I really like how we're doing these. This is a very broad scope lecture, but I really like showing how these questions are specific into these points, and that's what I'm going to do on Thursday. Is I'm going to cut out those sections and blow them up, and you're going to be able to see exactly what I mean by reading just a small portion of the passage to get to the answer.
absolutely. Yeah, we're just doing a bit of an overview today, so tune in on Thursday if you want to go, a little bit more in depth with Phil. But this is the reason why we do narrow scope questions first, and it's the reason why we skim. Frankly, if there were no narrow scope questions on the tests, it would be significantly harder, and we may not be telling you the same information. But there are always narrow scope informations on the test because this is how they design it to be. They've designed it this way. And because they've designed it this way, it means that you don't need to read the whole passage to get everything done in time. So narrow scope questions, how do I identify them? Right away, they're going to have line numbers in them, they're going to have quotations, and they're going to have specific vocabulary that they're referencing, okay? And you always do those first. Broad scope questions, once you've done your narrow scope questions, you can go on to the broad scope questions. These are the ones that are going to say, what is the main idea of the passage? What was the author's intent? What was the theme or tone? What is the purpose of this paragraph in the context of the whole passage? Things like that. There you have to sort of put things into context and look at the whole big picture. But by the time you've done, what was it, Phil? 6 out of 10 questions or so, 60% of the time, 70% of the time.
Yeah, on the ACT we
narrow scope.
Yeah, on the ACT we determined that it was 6. I'm actually going to count them. So for Thursday, I'm going to take 3 tests and count narrow versus broad. The SAT and the ACT are very similar. Reading is reading. Finding it. There is one particular question that the SAT likes to ask, and that is where is the best evidence? So
right.
I hope you got one of those.
Yes, we do. And that's pretty much the biggest difference that you're going to see between the two of them. But reading is reading. Reading is reading, and on both tests, they have narrow scope questions and they have broad scope questions. Now, on both tests, you are skimming, doing narrow scope questions, and then doing broad scope questions, absolutely on both tests. So here you go, broad scope questions, do them last. And now we have the SAT specific questions, which Phil was just referencing. And these are called paired questions. And on paired questions, there will be, and this is why you always, you want to know what questions there are. The questions are more important than the passage. That is always true on the SAT and the ACT. The questions are more important than the passage. The questions tell you where your answers are. The questions tell you what the answers are. You need to focus on the questions more so than the passage. On the SAT, they have these paired questions. And I took an example from practice test 1, the Akira passage. And the question says, why does Akira say his meeting with Chi is a, quote, matter of urgency, as referenced in line 32? The next question says, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Which translate means which choice that we give you right now is going to give you the answer to the previous question.
Right.
So they are giving you the answer that you need to 2 questions at the same time.
I particularly love these questions, and the one thing that I want to emphasize is when you're doing the SAT reading, this is completely focused on the SAT, is to read through the questions and look for this word best evidence, because a lot of times students will do a question without reading the very next question, saying that it's a paired one that gives you the answer,
Right.
And they've just wasted all that time. So I'll definitely do one of those on Thursday.
Yes, yes. These, I have gone through all of the practice SATs. They're on every single one. Every reading section has one
Everyone.
of these. Every single one has paired questions, which means that every single time you can be cutting down on your time whenever you're going through, or every single passage, you could be cutting down your time by doing 2 questions at once. And we'll go a little bit more in depth on these, and I'll show you on the passage that I brought up. And so it means that you really can't do one without the other. Even if you figured out the first question without doing the second question, you're going to get to the next one and then say, oh, well, the first question is going to help me. If I did the first one right, then I have to do the second one right. So you can't do one without the other, and why would you? You should be doing both of them at the same time. So let's look at an example here. Phil, how does this look on your end? Can you see this?
Poorly, but keep going.
Oh well. So this is the that's right, the space mining passages on practice test 1. I believe it's the 4th passage on the reading section. And these are usually harder because there's 2 passages. They usually have 2 specific purposes. They have 2 themes, 2 authors, and things like that, so they can be a little bit trickier, and you normally need to compare. But whenever you get to the questions, that is where you need to, you're going to be finding the information that you need. So don't be daunted by there being 2 passages or anything like that, okay? So here's a perfect example right here, question 43 and 44. 43 reads, the author of passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which positive effect? And then it gives you your answer choices. Question 44, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Which, again, translated means, which one of these line numbers that we reference here is going to answer number 43? So there's 2 questions being done at the same time. And so it's simply a matter of going back and saying, okay, now, what's really happening here is the author of passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which positive effect. So out of the line numbers suggested in question 44, which one indicates a positive effect? And so you would go back to the passage and say, okay, is it 18 to 22? Does it say anything about a positive effect? They can meet earthly demands for precious metals and things like that. Okay, possibly. And then you go through your process of elimination, which I'm sure Phil will talk about later on. But you go through your process of elimination on your questions, on your answer choices, and figure out, okay, which ones are lining up. And you start doing, you start going through each question. And usually elimination is one of the best ways to go through it, because as we like to say, if it's 99, or as David likes to say, if a question is
if an answer choice
is 99% right, it's 100% wrong, right?
Right.
Yeah.
If there's one part of it that's wrong. The thing that I like to say is go to the key words. The elements of the answer choices are words and phrases that you want to identify in it. So cut them down to what you specifically need. And that's where, a math teacher teaches reading. I'm going to go right to what word matches in the answer choices in 43 that's going to be in the lines of 44. And there's only going to be one that's there. And I like to say it, and I'll say this again on Thursday. I like to say this like it's a court of law. My client is not guilty. For example, right now there's a crime committed on 14th Street in Ambridge. Well, Your Honor, Will Meyer is not guilty because he is not on 14th Street in Ambridge, because we have evidence he's recorded on YouTube being in his home office. He doesn't have his robe on tonight, so the person was wearing a black hoodie, and instead he's wearing a sepia purple flannel millennial shirt.
That's just the lighting. I don't have that.
It's just the lighting. We need to get you some lighting in your room.
But that's exactly the point, is that there is a key word. And so in this case, number 43, and I hope you can kind of see it. Number 43, it's asking for which the author of passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which positive effect, right? our keyword here is going to be positive. One of the one of the line numbers is going to indicate a positive effect in passage 1. And based on that, you will have an answer to question number 43 based on the information that you got in number 44. So here we have 2 questions that can be done at the same time. I'm also going to point out in number 42, we have a line number mentioned. Well, we have several line numbers mentioned that we need to read carefully, right? So we're going to go back and read 9 to 17. Then number 44 is going to have us read 18 to 22, 24 to 28, 29 and 30, and 41 and 44. Based off of that, you've already read all the first passage, right? So what's the point of reading the whole thing on the first time through anyway? Just skim it for the pertinent information and move on. And then 45, you have to go back to 19. 46, you're reading 35 to 40. 48 is a narrow scope question asking about vocabulary and context in line 68.
How do you do that type of question?
Vocabulary and context?
Yeah, what do you do?
So if it's me, we call it vocabulary and context for a reason. You could have a word that means 100 different things, right? In the English language, we have words that mean all sorts of different things that sound exactly the same. They might be a homonym, or it might just have so many different uses. Whenever someone who's learning English as a second language, the example that's always used is catch, right? How do you catch a cold? These common turns of phrases that we use in English, that when someone is learning English, they think, you're not catching anything. You got sick, right? You contracted a sickness or something, right? You didn't catch a cold, but that's just the way that we speak. So you always need to look at these things in context. So in this case, let's look at the question. As used in line 68, quote, hold, end quote, most nearly means what? Maintain, grip, restrain, or withstand. So we have to go back to 68. All right, so in 68 it says, history suggests that those will be hard lines to hold, and it may be difficult to persuade the public. So these lines to hold that they're talking about are actually talking about arguments, right?
I've got a way faster way of doing this. You're doing the English You're doing the English literature thing. You're trying to understand, okay? Just take.
I already know the answer. It's going to be maintain.
Right. Take the
I'm just trying to explain it.
Take the words, put them in the sentence, and read them out loud.
Absolutely.
Just replace the words. What they do here, this has been a SAT question for a long time. This is vocabulary and context. The SAT came out for the 2016 test and said they're going to use more common words, but what they're using is a word that has, like you said, multiple ordinal definitions. So if you look up hold in the dictionary, there's going to be 14 different definitions. All of these answer choices are synonyms for hold in some context. The question is what context it is, and that's why we call it vocabulary and context. Replace the answer choices in the passage and read it, and which one makes sense. Some of them are just ridiculous. So don't try to do it without the passage.
No, and you're right. I was trying to explain why they're even asking the question.
You're a literature major. You're explaining.
Input the words, and one will make sense, and 3 others will not. And in this case, it's maintain. You're maintaining an argument against someone else. You're not gripping an argument. You're not restraining your own argument. You're not withstanding your own argument. Right?
And there's always some ridiculous answer like grip. Hold, right. To hold on to something means to grip it. They're definitely going to put that answer choice, and it has absolutely no place in context in this passage.
Exactly. So I wanted to point out, even though this is a tough passage, you'll notice that on the tougher passages, there's actually more narrow scope questions usually, because I think they kind of need it to be that way. And this is sort of my interpretation, but I think the harder the passages, the more narrow scope questions there are going to be. And if you'll notice here, 50 and 51, there's another which choice provides the best evidence for number 50.
Oh, right? This has been an SAT thing for many, many years, and that is if it is a technical scientific passage, it's going to have line references.
Right.
That is absolutely true. When it gets
Okay.
into the humanities or to the fiction, that's more the author's interpretation. So there are different brain structures, different reading styles that they put on there. There's the literature major person, and then there's the engineering student. The engineering student loves this type of passage because it just give me the damn answer, I'm going to find it, as opposed to what did the author mean by the green light and the Great Gatsby,
Right.
you know. And was Holden Caulfield's English teacher? Well, we won't ask what Holden Caulfield's English teacher was, but we all know.
So yeah, that is other than the paired questions. There is very little difference between the SAT and the ACT reading sections,
Except for
and
it's
the
longer.
method, except it is longer. It is significantly. It is double the amount of time. So it is longer. They have paired questions, and we were talking about this a little bit before. A little bit before we got online here is data tables. So the SAT will include a data table in their reading section at some point to try to science up their reading section a little bit, but don't let it throw you off.
It's true.
It's reading with an X and Y axis, so don't let that throw you off. But be aware that it on every SAT in the reading section, they're going to have a data table. It's not like the ACT where you have an entire section, but don't let it throw you off. Don't let it spook you or anything. All you need to do is skim, do narrow scope questions, then do broad scope questions. And on the SAT, look for paired questions. That's one of the big things that makes the SAT, I think, a little bit more digestible, just a little bit easier.
I like that you like the SAT reading better because I think the SAT reading totally sucks. I think it's too long. I think it's ridiculous in its scope. I think that it puts on the old passages, and the ACT gets right to it. It's a surgical reading passage, but then once again, I'm practiced at it. So one of the keys is I'm very, very fluent in SAT, ACT reading. So when I get to the ACT, the one thing that I know is that there's a lot of direct quotations. And so I can find them quickly, and the ones that aren't direct quotations are very meaningful in terms of giving the definition, and so you can fight for it. But you do have to do it with speed. And once again, I'll show that on Thursday. I'll show the problem with the reading and the SAT is it's not a single score. It gets lumped together with your writing score, whereas the writing and the what's called the English on the ACT is a separate score. So I do like that too, and that we get separate scores. So there's things to like and there's things not to like. There's a lot of people that have SAT on the brain. They think the SAT is better because it's the granddaddy, it's the 100-year-old test. Whereas the ACT is just more friendly and more predictable.
I'm going to stop sharing here, but I want to say that I agree with you, and I mentioned it last night. I took the SAT whenever I was in high school and I was going off to college. I incorrectly believed that the ACT just wouldn't be the right test for me, and I wish someone had really convinced me otherwise, that the ACT is just a better test.
I wish I'd have known it existed. I mean, the science section is as easy as they come. I mean, we're going to do a whole science week. I'm working with a couple of other people. We'll have some guests in there and how to pick out the science. So
I got a D in 10th grade biology, but when I took the science portion on the ACT, I got a 34 in the first try without it's just reading.
It's just reading.
It's just reading.
Well,
as a high schooler, I was terrified of science.
Well, as I like to say, the reading passage is reading, the math is reading and translating, the science is reading, and the reading is reading, and the writing is reading, and the English is reading. The whole thing is reading. It's all written down in the English language. So that's why I like to joke with students is, can you read English? This is written in your native tongue. They're all reading questions. So that was a really good presentation on the SAT. I like how you broke it apart. It was really important to show the best evidence questions and to show the length. Tomorrow we're going to have on Emily Fear, who is the teen librarian from Swickley. We're literally going to talk about just reading. We're not going to talk about SAT or ACT reading. But Will, wouldn't you agree that just general reading will help you improve on your skill in reading for the SAT and the ACT?
Absolutely. Reading improves your life in every way possible. It doesn't matter what you read, just that you do it. It increases brain activity. It increases empathy. Reading.
Oh, I could care less about empathy.
For everything.
All right, leave us with one thing to read.
One thing to read. Let's see. Right now, I was just reading. Oh, here's what I just read the short story "Most Dangerous Game" the other night. I had this book of short stories, so that's the short story about.
Is that the one where the guy has to live alone?
You've heard the phrase "man is the most dangerous game," right?
Or is that the one where he hunts the men?
Just the one where
That's where he hunts the guy. That's right. It's where he hunts the man.
Okay, yeah,
That's where the famous line comes from. So I just read that yesterday whenever I was bored in quarantine. I just read a couple of Charles Dickens novels. I don't know. Read whatever you like to read. I always like a good spy novel. They're thrilling. They're page turning.
I do.
I read all sorts of wild stuff.
I like murder mysteries. I sometimes get hooked on private detectives. I like private detectives that are very flawed characters, that are like ex-cops who have fallen on hard times, and they start drinking on Tuesday and they wake up on Thursday and they miss the major clue. I love stories like that.
Absolutely. I always recommend to guys. Usually guys ask me, I want to get back into reading. What do I read? I tell guys all the time, like, spy novels. There are very few men that I know that don't like a good spy novel. It just kind of is what it is. I read poetry and short stories and everything, but I also love a good spy
Okay, you
novel.
can turn in your man card the next time you come in when coronavirus is offers. You actually read poetry?
All the time. All the time.
Excellent. Good thing.
Half my books here.
Excellent. Half your books are poetry. So there's going to be a lot of poetry when you teach the 4th grade.
That would be great.
All right, time to wrap it up. Will, thanks so much. You did a great job on how to read for the SAT and the ACT. Thanks for being a guest on 8:30 Prep. Tomorrow night, Emily Fear, please tune in. Thank you so much. Will, have a great night. And
thanks, guys.
And stay purple.
See ya. Will do.
Don't forget to wait. Teo said. Oh, the meme of the week. Actually, we're going to change it to the question of the day. I think we're going to start doing a really tough question that I send out to students based on what
riddles.
I'm teaching. So riddles. Oh,
I love riddles.
Oh, we'll come up with a riddle for us. That'd be great.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'll get to my riddle book.
All right, get us some riddles. All right, I'm Phil McCaffrey. This is 8:30 Prep. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night. We'll see you, Will.